when Clay reached out about coming speaking tonight, he threw out a topic. And the topic is, I think it's a really difficult topic. And I know you guys have been covering some really hard topics, which I love that. But here's the topic we're going to look at tonight. It's one question. Can I trust God with my future? Anybody want to trade spots right now? Like really, can I trust God with my future? And don't raise your hand on this here, but curious, is that on the heart of anybody in this room tonight? Did you walk into this place really wrestling through, Lord, can I trust you with my future? And I'm sure the answer is, probably for the majority of us in this room, yes. We wrestle with that question. Some of you are probably thinking tonight, can I trust God with tomorrow? Can I even trust Him with tomorrow? Some of you are probably in circumstances and situations right now that are really difficult, maybe really painful, and you're asking the question tonight of, Lord, can I trust you with these circumstances? Will I see the light at the end of the tunnel? Some of you may be thinking, okay, graduation's coming soon. Can I trust God with my future? Can I trust God with my career? And probably if I asked for a show of hands, everybody in this room would raise their hand on this one. Some of you are wondering, is there going to be a day when I get married? Right? Because that's not relevant to anybody in this room right now at all. And you're wondering, all right, Lord, is it going to happen? Is it really going to happen? Can I trust you? Maybe that I have a desire to marry somebody who loves the Lord. Is this going to happen one day? Or is it not? Some of you guys are thinking about just your career path. Can I trust the Lord with that? Some of you are thinking about one day you would love to have a family. Lord, can I trust you that one day that, man, my desire, and I think it's a pure desire, I want to have a family, would that actually come true? Some of you are just thinking, Lord, can I trust you, and do I even have a future? Is that upon anybody's heart tonight? Do I even have a future, Lord? And maybe you grew up in a family that unfortunately just degraded you to the point that you're going, I don't know if I'm significant. I don't know if I have a future, period. Because I've been told all my life that I don't. And so we're going to tackle that question tonight. And here's the approach we're going to tackle. The approach is simple. We're going to not allow our feelings to answer the question, can I trust God in my future? We're not going to allow our opinions to answer that question tonight. We're going to allow His Word to answer it for us. Because it is the truth in this room tonight. And it's the truth that we can hold on to. So what I'd love to do, ladies, here's a little shout out for you, okay? That we're going to go, thank you, we're going to go straight to the Old Testament. We're going to look at a story of a woman who had this very question upon her heart. Could she trust God with her future? And I think it's relevant to all men and women tonight in this room. So, if you have a Bible with you or on your phone here, we're going to go to the book of Ruth. There you go, ladies. I told you, shout out here, right? We're going to the book of Ruth tonight. This, and I say this with great pride, the book of Ruth is one of my favorite books in the entire Bible. It's phenomenal. If you've never read this book before, it's really short. It's pretty simple. But it is a phenomenal story of a woman who had to wrestle through, can I trust God with my future? So we're going to start in verse 1 of chapter 1 tonight. We're not reading the entire book here, but the first few verses give us the story of a woman who's trying to figure out, can I trust God with my future? So we're going to start in verse 1 here together. Here's the story. It says, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. Let's stop here just for a moment, all right? So what you have here is really, again, it's a fascinating story. This story took place 1140 BC. So we're talking over 1,000 years before Jesus arrived. And so what we learn here in this first verse is that there was a famine in Israel, and there was a family, a mom, a dad, and their 2 boys. They leave Israel, and anybody catch there, where did they travel to? A place called Moab. Moab was completely different than Israel. It was a pagan country. They were not worshipers of Yahweh at all. They didn't believe that the God that you have entrusted your life to, they didn't believe in him at all. But they believed in pagan gods. And they believed in many different pagan gods as well. And so this man, his wife, and their sons pack up shop. They move to a place called Moab. It was a foreign land for them. Look at verse 2. It says, the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi. And the names of their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. By the way, I had to look that up, make sure I pronounced it right tonight, all right? Hey, a little side note as a pastor, okay? You just, Old Testament names, you fake it until you make it, okay? They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. And they went into the country of Moab, and they remained there. And so just imagine for a second, if you were part of this family, that you could no longer stay in the land that you grew up in. That was your home. You had to pack up shop because you couldn't provide for your family. The famine had struck your land. So you moved to this place where you knew nobody at all. They arrived there in Moab, and notice what happens here in verse 3. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, help me out. What happens? He died. He died. So they pack up their lives because they couldn't survive in their homeland. When they arrive there, the husband of the family dies. So if you're Naomi, you are now a widow. You are grieving the loss of your husband. If you're the 2 sons, you just lost your dad. So do you feel the gravity there for a moment? Like the weight of this story, like they're going through pain and they're not living in their homeland now. They must have felt alone, probably questioning God during this time. Notice what else it says. It says, and she was left with her 2 sons. Verse 4. These took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah. I always want to say Oprah right there, but it's Orpah, okay? And the name of the other, who? Ruth. They lived there about 10 years. And so the sons meet their wife. They get married. And we know that Ruth was a Moabite woman who married an Israelite man. We don't know who went with who here, okay? But we know that Ruth marries one of the sons here. And how long did they live there in Moab? For 10 years. Check out the next verse. And both Mahlon and Chilion died. So that the woman was left with her 2 sons, or without her 2 sons, and her husband. What a sad story, right? I mean, if you're Naomi, you packed up your life, you moved to a different land, you lose your husband over a 10-year period, and who else do you lose? Your 2 sons. So just put Naomi's 10-year period together. She had 2 weddings in 10 years, and she had 3 what? Funerals. She had 3 funerals. 2 weddings, 3 funerals over a 10-year period. And now the story is really interesting because it brings you to this point to where Naomi, the mom, the mother-in-law, she's looking now at her 2 daughter-in-laws. She's looking at them, and when you read on the rest of the chapter, she says, I'm heading back home. I'm not staying in Moab anymore. It's been a rough 10 years. I'm widowed now, and I had to bury my 2 sons as well. So I'm going back home. And she looks at her 2 daughter-in-laws, and she says, if you want to come with me, you can. Because think about if you're Ruth or Orpah, like what do you have? What's your future? Like it doesn't seem good, right? They had no job. They had no income. We would look at them and we would think, wow, like you have no future at all. And so Naomi looks at them. Orpah says, I'm sorry, I got to stay here in my homeland. And Ruth finds herself in a place to where she understands she has nowhere else to go. And she looks at Naomi and she says, I'm going with you to Israel. I'm going with you. I think what's on the heart of Ruth at this point is really simple. It's the question we're looking at tonight. Can I trust God with my future? She was not from Israel. She knew nothing about Israel. She'd never been to Israel, it looks like. And she's going with her mother-in-law. Can I trust God with my future? So if anybody had that question upon your heart tonight, are you kind of sitting here going, you know what? Ruth had it a lot worse than I did. Maybe I can trust God with my future. But here she is, 1,000 years before Jesus came. And she's asking, it seems like the same question. Can I trust God with my future? And here we are 2,000 years after Jesus came. And what are we asking still today? Lord, can I trust you with my future? Like, have you ever wrestled with that? Do you struggle with the thought of, God, can I trust you with my future? Like, really, can I? Because we all wrestle with it to some degree. We tend to think we're the only ones, but we all wrestle with it. Why do we struggle to trust God with our future? I want to give you two, I think, primary reasons why we struggle with it. Two reasons, I think, why we struggle with trusting God with our future. Number one tonight, we'll put it up on the screen here for you, that we fail to trust God with our future because we really don't consider his resume. I want you to think about that for a moment. One of the reasons I think we struggle to trust God with our future is because we don't really consider his resume. If you're like me, I tend to get wrapped up in my little life. Am I the only one here who does that, by the way? Thank you, I am. You guys made me feel really welcome on that, okay? I know I told you don't raise your hand earlier, okay? I was needing some participation on that one. I struggle with that. I tend to think this is my own little life. This past Sunday as a church, we were talking about, we tend to think that we're the main character of the story, right? We tend to think that, hey, this world revolves around me, but I want to put it in perspective tonight, and if this is for anybody, it's probably for me tonight. Because one of my favorite ways to illustrate and kind of get a proper perspective of who is in control, how big is God, how little is Danny, is by zooming out a little bit. So just follow along, if you will, here. Some of you have heard this before, but so think about, you and I live in a town of a population of 100,000 people. We tend to think that, hey, we're the main character of our story in this town. But if you zoom out and you see a picture of Tyler, you start to realize, you know what, I'm like one of 100,000 people. I'm not the main character of my own town. I'm not really as big as I think that I am. And I look at that picture and I start to ponder the thought, maybe this world doesn't revolve around me. Do you want to feel a little bit smaller tonight? We will, okay? You really don't have a say in this. We're going bigger. Let's zoom out a little bit further. We live in a country of roughly 330 million people. You and I are not the main characters of our own country. This country doesn't revolve around us. We're a small speck in our own country. And if you zoom out even a little bit further, you start to realize we're a small speck on planet Earth. A population of roughly 7.7 billion people. But then you zoom out maybe a little bit more, and we go out to our galaxy. I love this one right here, okay? That's the Milky Way Galaxy. And notice how big and awesome and impressive planet Earth is in our galaxy, right? Y'all, our planet is a speck in our own galaxy. It is tiny. Like, it's so tiny, we have to highlight it on this picture. That's how small our little planet is. And think about it, that's how small we are. And you look at our own galaxy, the Milky Way, and then you start to consider the entire cosmos, and you begin to realize there are roughly 2 trillion other galaxies in our cosmos. 2 trillion other galaxies. Our galaxy isn't even the main character in the entire universe at this point, right? And we are just a small little speck in all of creation. But here's my point. If we are not the main character, who is? Who created all of that? Sunday school answer, please. God. God. And you consider for a moment how big and awesome and powerful He is. That He stands over all of that. Over all 2 trillion galaxies. Over all of creation. I mean, I tend to put God in this small little box, and He loves blowing up my boxes that I put Him in. Because He's that glorious, that big, that powerful, that strong, that brilliant. Like, that's how amazing He is. And I don't want to stop there, because consider for a moment how awesome He is and that He rules over all of the entire universe. Yet He zooms in and He's so personal that He knows every part about your life. Like, it's one thing to know Him as this big, awesome God. It's a totally different thing to understand that He zooms all the way in and goes, I know the number of hairs on your head. I know every thought about you. I know you more than you know yourself. Like, that's how personal He is. So if we ask the question tonight, can I trust God with my future? Just imagine this for a moment. Zoom out a little bit. See how He's controlling all things in this moment, in the entire universe. He's not overwhelmed by that. And you're overwhelmed by your exam tomorrow. And yet He zooms all the way into the point that He says, I know you personally. I have a future for you. You're not just operating through this life unknown. Consider His resume. All that He has created and all that He knows. Can you trust Him? And forgive me and hear my heart in this. Can you trust Him with your little future that's still very significant to Him? I think the answer is yes. But when we struggle trusting Him, we fail to consider His resume and how awesome He is and how big He is and how in control He is and how well He knows us. I think the second reason that we tend to struggle with this, and again, I am absolutely in the same boat with you here tonight on this. I think we fail to trust Him with our future because we tend to forget the gospel. Just bear with me for a second. I want you to think through this. Think about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, the gospel, the good news of Jesus. Something that Ruth and Naomi didn't have a full grasp of because they're well before when Jesus arrives. You and I have the honor and the grace of God that we stand on this side of the cross now, so we can look back and look at His life, His death, His resurrection. The gospel. But when you gave your life to Jesus, when you gave your life to Christ, and maybe you're here tonight and you haven't given your life to Christ, and I know some of the leadership here or anybody else would love to talk with you more about that. I'd love to talk with you more about that as well, because it's the greatest thing that you can do. And you know in Him that your future is absolutely secure. But when you placed your faith in Christ, that it was more than, okay, now I get into heaven. It was the absolute confirmation in your life that nothing can take you out of the hand of God. That's how powerful the cross is. That's how strong and good the cross is. That when Jesus died and He proclaimed that it is finished, it was finished. And then you read Romans chapter 8, And the Apostle Paul just goes off and he says, look, because of the gospel, nothing can separate you from the love of God. So what does this have to say about our future? If you're a believer in Christ, you've trusted Jesus, you place your faith in him, you believe in the gospel, there is a promise upon your life that nothing in your future can ever separate you from the love of God. Let me just read some truth over us tonight. Romans chapter 8. And just sit back and consider for a moment the fact that this is the truth over your life and your future. Paul said this in Romans chapter 8, starting out in verse 35. He said, "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress?" Is that relevant to anybody tonight? Going through distress? Or persecution? Or famine? Probably not us tonight, all right? Or nakedness, or danger, or sword? He goes on, he says, as is written, "For your sake we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered." Check this out. "No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels or rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers or height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord." So no matter what happens to you in your future, no matter what paths God will take you down, no matter what you encounter in this life, on this side of heaven, through the gospel, you have a promise that nothing can separate you from the love of God. Nothing. You can try to outrun him, and you won't succeed. You can try to hide, it won't happen. You may experience pain in this life. You will have pain in your future. We live in a broken world. But nothing, not even that pain, will separate you from the love of Christ. We must remember the gospel. So what happened to Ruth? I'll summarize it here for us. It's really interesting because she goes to Israel with Naomi. Again, I can't just imagine what it would have been like for her to step into Israel knowing nobody but her mother-in-law. When she and Naomi walk into Bethlehem, Naomi's hometown, it's interesting because some of the people are like, "Oh, wow, Naomi, welcome back." And you would think there'd be this grand celebration that Naomi was like, "Yes, it's so good to be home. Let's have a little family reunion here. Let's get some KFC," because that's what you do for family reunions. I don't know. Like, let's have a big celebration. That's not what happens. Naomi walks up to her friends in her hometown, and she says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore." She actually says, "Call me Mara," which meant bitter. Because of, why was she bitter? Her last 10 years were awful. But then, a chapter later in chapter 2, Naomi looks at Ruth's life, and she starts to realize that God has had his hand upon Ruth. That God was at work the whole time. And that God is actually blessing Ruth. She meets a man. His name is Boaz. Fellas, that's a name, all right? Name your son Boaz, all right? God provides for Ruth. He took care of Ruth. There were some twists and turns in her life and her future, right? There were some things that she did not see coming. But then Naomi looks at Ruth's life and she says, "You have been blessed by the Lord Almighty." Men and women, I'm here to tell you tonight, I don't know what your future is. I don't know what it is. I'm not grabbing the magic 8-ball, trying to figure it out for you. I don't know what it is. And I'm not going to tell you tonight, too, that you will have a perfect, no pain included, clear future. Because if you live long enough, you'll realize God places twists and turns in your life, right? There's some times that he takes you to places you never dreamed you would be. I don't know what your future is, but I do know who holds your future. And I truly believe that he is calling you out to say, come on the adventure with me. Come on the adventure with me. Some of you control freaks want to figure it all out, right? You want to map it all out and hand it to God and say, God, here's my future. And then he says, well, why don't we just zoom out to the Milky Way and just see how small you are? And your little plans are really small. Could it be tonight he's calling you out, not telling you every detail of your future, but he's calling you out into a great adventure with him, the one who holds your future. And he's saying, trust me. Trust me. I'll conclude here. So 20 years ago, Kara and I went on our honeymoon. So we went to Kauai on our honeymoon. It was an incredible time. I'd never been to Hawaii before, so I was really excited. It was our honeymoon. I thought I would be the gentleman as we arrived at our resort, and so I was like, babe, you don't carry any bags. Like, I'm carrying all the bags. So I put all the bags on my shoulders, and she said, do you know where our room is? And I said, oh, yeah, as if I'd been there before. I'd never been there. I didn't have a clue where it was at. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm trying to be a leader here, I guess, all right? And so I have all the bags on. We get lost walking to our room. And we come to the end of the resort to where there are literally no more rooms in the end of the parking lot. And so I said, well, let's just take a right here. And so we took a right, and then we walk around the edge of the building, and we come right out to a massive, massive pool. There's a pool unlike any pool I'd seen before there at the resort. We actually have a picture of it, okay? Yeah, right? Yeah. So just imagine me, complete idiot, with all the bags here. And I'm like, oh, hey, hello, pool. So that, honestly, is only half of the pool. That's half of the pool. It makes a complete circle. It has these pillars here. There are hot tubs in the pillars, or underneath the pillars, or whatever it is. There are multiple restaurants around the pool. You can go out to the middle. On this little island here, we have, for some reason, concrete lions spraying water out of their mouths. I don't know what's going on there. But it was a pool unlike any pool I'd ever seen in my life. It was beautiful. We hung out there often. And throughout the week, I began to realize, I was like, man, the majority of the people are hanging out at the pool throughout the week. And again, it's a pretty impressive pool. You know what was only 100 yards from that pool? This. The Pacific Ocean. That was 100 yards from the pool. And the majority of the people that week stayed where? In the safe pool. You know the depth of that pool. The deepest part, 10 feet. It's simple. But hey, it's comfortable. It's controlled. It's easy. But it's nothing compared to the adventure that is the Pacific Ocean. And I look back at that week and I think, man, those people missed out. Is this safe? Not always, as we would call it safe. And I know what some of you guys are thinking there are, in sharks, right? Okay, you've watched Shark Week too much. But there are fish that we've never seen before. There's life in that ocean. There is depth, there is adventure, there is beauty. It's not controlled by us. I equate that, men and women, to, hey, if you think about your future, do you want to stay in the kiddie pool? Or do you want to step out into the adventure that God has called you to? The kiddie pool is simple. You control it. The ocean, the depths of the ocean, man, that's where the adventure is. And it's controlled by not you, it's controlled by the controller of the entire universe. So what's it going to be? Is it going to be, I don't know if I can trust him, I'm staying in the kiddie pool? Or is it going to be, I'm stepping out and saying, I don't know where all of this future is going, but I know it belongs to him. I'm trusting him, and I'm ready to walk out and dive in the depths of the ocean on an adventure that only he could take you on. That starts one place. It starts tonight in your heart and surrendering to him and saying, Lord, I trust you with my future. And I surrender to your ways. I surrender to your ways. Let's pray together. I'd love to give you some time, some space. Spend with the Lord. Maybe for just somebody, one person tonight, maybe it is at this moment that you say, God, I trust you with my future. Maybe for some of us tonight, it's just a time of confession. Lord, I have been holding tight to my future. I've tried to control it. I confess to you, Lord, my pride, my control, I'm surrendering it to you. Or maybe tonight for someone, it's, Lord, I give my life to you, Jesus, and I want to go on this adventure with you. I'm confessing, Lord, that I've run to things of this world, but I'm turning to you, Christ, and surrendering my life.